Today we're going to talk about Genesis 21, verse 19. And in this verse, I'm going to give you some background after I read the verse. Genesis 21:19 says, "Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well. So she went and filled the waterskin and gave the boy a drink." Now this might seem like kind of an obscure verse to decide to do a read and reflect on, but to give you the background, this is the story of when Hagar was sent away. And so she and Ishmael were sent away. And we know this story. We know that God had made this promise to Abraham that he would be the father of many nations. And then it was taking quite a while for God's promise to be fulfilled. And so Sarah had it in her mind that she was going to help God's plan along. And so she had Abraham have a child through her servant, Hagar. And Ishmael was born, and God did ultimately have Sarah have a child of her own, and it was Isaac. And there was tension, as there would be with this kind of a scenario. And more than once, Hagar ended up on the run. She ended up leaving. And it's this interaction between her and God that I find so powerful. So we read, if we go back just a little bit, it says that as she was out, it says that she had been sent away with water and food. And then it says in verse 15, when the water in the skin was gone, she left the boy under one of the bushes and went and sat at a distance, about a bow shot away. For she said, "I can't bear to watch the boy die." And then she sat at a distance and she wept. And this brings me to remember when she left before. And she left before, and it was in chapter 16. And in that situation, she had run away from Sarah because she was being abused and mistreated, I guess is the way that it said. But she left. And again, as she's running away, it says that an angel of the Lord found her, and he said, "Where have you come from and where are you going?" And then I'm going to flip back again to this passage where, again, Hagar is in the wilderness, and the first thing that God says to her is, "What's wrong, Hagar?" And it just strikes me the fact that in both of these situations, first of all, she is having a conversation with the Lord. Or in chapter 16, it says it's an angel of the Lord, but she's having this conversation and he's asking questions. And again, God knew the answer. He wasn't saying, "Where have you come from and where are you going?" because he really didn't know. He knew. But he's asking the question. He's asking these questions of her because he's getting to the crux of the situation here. In this situation, he says, "What's wrong?" And then he says to her, "Don't be afraid, for God has heard the boy crying from the place where he is. Get up. Grasp his hand, for I will make him a great nation." And then it says, "Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well." You see, both of these passages, it talks about the fact that God saw her. He saw her in the midst of her distress. He saw her and he heard her and he provided. He provided what she needed. He provided her with the information about what was going to happen in the future. And every time I read this passage, when it says, "Then God opened her eyes," it reminds me of times in my life when I have been blinded by fear or sadness. And if you've ever gone through a horrible, tragic loss or a really scary time, there are times when you can't see anything beyond the fear or the sadness. And that's where Hagar was at this time. She could not see. And it's quite probable she literally couldn't see it. But it's also possible that she was so afraid And she was so sad that she was blinded by her fear and sadness. And then God opened her eyes. And so I find such comfort in this passage to know that in the midst of this deep distress, this really difficult time for her, God saw her and he heard her cries and he provided for her. And I know that there have been times in my past, and there will be times in the future, where fear or sadness will threaten to blind me to what God's doing. And I pray for myself in the future, and for any of us who might be listening, for any of you that might be listening and going through that God would open our eyes and help us to see what he has for us. Have a great week.